Good news came out from the village early in the morning, saying that the educated youth Ma Guoqing had caught a superb cricket. Based on the vicious shot of this cricket, people speculated that 9 times might have been caught by Ma Guoqing. Ma Guoqing is an educated youth from Nanjing, a crazy fan of the leader's badge. His collection is too many to count. The largest is the size of a huge bowl, and the smallest is only as small as a fingernail. Not only that, but there are also 2 rare treasures in Ma Guoqing's collection, which are known as luminous badges. The luminous badges look nothing unusual during the day, but when it is late at night, the badges will emit a fluffy green light like the eyes of an owl. This determines that the badges can shine brightly in 24 hours. It is said that after the dark night, Ma Guoqing sometimes pinned the luminous badge to his chest, left and right, and our leader would lighten up green out of nothing, and smile affectionately at the dark night. Who would have thought that Ma Guoqing would become obsessed with cricket? In the days when he was extremely boring, he was infatuated in a moment. Not only he is infatuated because Ma Guoqing doesn't believe that crickets are changed from dead people, but he also continues to preach materialistic crickets during the process of playing cricket. Ardai is annoying when he hears Ma Guoqing's words. Ardai refuses to fight him. Ardai said, "He knows shit." Ma Guoqing named his newly caught cricket Storm and Rain. However, in private, people still habitually call Storm and Rain 9 times. 9 times was very skillful and had already repelled 4 crickets in one morning. Someone told Ardai the news. Ardai lay on the bed, turned sideways, and fell asleep again. Ardai didn't believe it at all. Ardai didn't believe that a man who had done with a woman 9 times a night could become a promising cricket. A person like 9 times is fierce while alive and must be a soft leg after death. Ardai is now looking forward to the dark and wandering around the little old man's grave after dark. Ardai firmly believes that the lonely cricket is the killer and death messenger of other crickets. This night is a bit too dark. There is no moon in the sky, not even a star can be seen. Even fingers cannot be seen. With a cricket stick in his mouth and a flashlight in his armpit, Ardai walked to the mass grave alone. While reaching the entrance of the village, Ardai heard the footsteps of 4 or 5 people coming from the dark alley. They must have come to the mass grave with their companions to catch the crickets. This cannot conceal from Ardai. Ardai decided to stop them. Except for himself tonight, Ardai does not allow anyone on the mass grave. Ardai stood in the dark, motionless. As soon as the sound of footsteps walked in front of him, Ardai pointed the flashlight at his chin and pressed the switch forcefully. Suddenly, a bright face appeared in the air of extreme darkness, quiet and silent, like a piece of paper, hanging nowhere, leaning on no side, with a very strange relationship between light and dark. 4 or 5 people were nailed there. Before they had time to scream, Ardai blinked his eyes in a daze. That is to say, the drawn eyes on a piece of paper suddenly blinked. While the flashlight is off in that blink, in the darkness, Ardai heard them turn around and rushed all the way. They ran all the way and shouted, "Ghost! Ghost! 9 times it's back! 9 times it's back!" Panicking sounds of closing doors sounded in the whole village. Ardai stood there, knowing that there would not be a second person go to the mass grave tonight. Ardai smiled silently and swayed slowly towards the mass grave. After walking into the mass grave, Ardai found the tomb of the little old man. The sky is too dark. All the trees are just darker shadows. Ardai cautiously crawled in front of the old man's tomb, trying his best to listen and distinguish. However, the hoarse and old voice never appeared. Ardai knew that a good cricket would not move easily, so he simply lay down, closed his eyes, and opened his ears. Ardai didn't know how long he had been laying and seemed to be asleep. Ardai didn't notice that the educated youth Ma Guoqing was already standing in front of him. These nights, Ma Guoqing has been trailing behind Ardai. The educated youth who loves badges, is obsessed with cricket, has reached the level of not thinking about food. Ma Guoqing will follow where Ardai goes. After waking up, Ardai opened his eyes. The night is still so dark, and still like that you can't even see your fingers. But Ardai, who opened his eyes, noticed something strange in the darkness. Ardai found a shadow that was darker than the night standing in front of him, somewhat human-like, straightened. Ardai's scalp was a little hairy, and finally felt uneasy, and turned on the flashlight at the figure. As soon as Ardai's flashlight was turned on, the shadow on the opposite side stretched out a hand. Ardai's arm softened, and the flashlight fell to the ground, went off. The mass graves fell back into the gloomy darkness. The thing that made Ardai's soul out of his body happened at this time. Under the stimulation of strong light, the luminous badges shined. A pair of round eyes suddenly opened on the chest of the shadow darker than the night, emitting terrifying green lights. The eyes were far apart, and each was the size of an open mouth, aggressive and piercing. There were only these green eyes between the entire dark world. All the hair on Ardai's body immediately stood up, and a pair of huge pupils stared at Ardai, staring at him intently. Ma Guoqing took a step forward, and Ardai didn't even have time to call for help. His soul went out of his body and turned into a cricket on the spot. Ardai walked in the mass graves all night. When Ardai returned to the village early the next morning, people unexpectedly discovered that Ardai was different. The current Ardai is both a cricket and a person. In other words, he is neither a cricket nor a person. In a word, one of his feet stepped on the upper world, and the other foot completely stepped into the underworld.